There are moments in life that strip everything away: the fame, the cameras, the carefully constructed public image, and leave behind only a raw, trembling human being. For Tyler Henry, one of Hollywood's most recognized and controversial mediums, that moment came not on a television set, not during a dramatic reading for a celebrity, but in the quiet, sterile aftermath of a hospital room, where the man who has spent his career speaking for the dead was forced to confront the very real possibility that his own life might slip away. What followed was something the world had never seen from Tyler Henry before: tears, unfiltered fear, and a vulnerability so profound that it shook his fan base to its core. This is not a story about psychic powers or celebrity gossip. This is a story about a young man, barely in his late 20s, who married the love of his life, and then walked directly into one of the most terrifying medical experiences a human being can endure. And it is a story about what happens when someone who has always been the person others lean on, the one who delivers messages from beyond, who holds space for other people's grief, finally allows himself to fall apart. The news broke quietly at first. Social media posts from Tyler's husband, Clint Godwin, began appearing in the spring of 2025, cautiously worded and measured in tone, but impossible to misread for those paying close attention. Something was wrong. Something serious. The man who had walked into Hollywood living rooms and delivered messages that left celebrities weeping was now lying in a hospital bed, his own mind clouded and struggling to function. And when the full picture finally came into focus, the reaction from fans around the world was immediate and overwhelming. The comments poured in. The prayers flooded every platform. People who had never met Tyler Henry wept openly in videos posted online, sharing how much his work had meant to them, how a reading he had given to someone else had somehow helped them process their own grief. And then came the moment no one expected. Tyler himself, in a raw and unguarded update, broke down completely. The composed, serene medium that millions had come to know was gone, replaced by a man weeping openly about fear, about loss of self, about not knowing who he was anymore without the mental clarity that defined everything he did. To understand why that moment hit so hard, you have to understand where Tyler Henry came from. He was born prematurely, arriving into the world 3 months early, and weighing barely 2 pounds and 12 ounces. Those first weeks of his life were spent in a neonatal intensive care unit, his tiny body still developing outside the womb, his survival uncertain. It was a beginning that already spoke of fragility, of a life lived close to the edge. His mother, Teresa, raised him in California's Central Valley, a world away from the Hollywood glitter he would eventually inhabit. From early childhood, Tyler experienced the world differently than the children around him. He sensed things, felt presences, picked up on emotional information that others seemed completely unaware of. He didn't have a name for it then. He only knew he was different. The defining moment came when Tyler was 10 years old. He told his mother that he felt his grandmother was going to die soon. The very next night, she passed away. That experience didn't frighten Tyler so much as it clarified something he had already sensed. He wasn't imagining things. He wasn't making it up. Something real was happening in his mind and his body, and rather than push it away, his mother helped him understand it. She sought guidance, connected with others who could help Tyler develop and understand his abilities, and ultimately became his manager as his reputation began to spread among people looking for exactly what he offered: a connection to those they had lost. But there was something else happening inside Tyler's body that no one knew about, not his fans, not most of his colleagues, and perhaps not even Tyler himself, in its full gravity for many years. From birth, he had carried a congenital cyst deep in his brain, located near the brain center. This cyst, medically classified as a colloid cyst, is benign in the traditional sense. It is not cancerous, but it carries its own quiet danger. As it grows, it can block the flow of cerebrospinal fluid, creating pressure inside the skull that, if left unchecked, can result in catastrophic neurological damage or death. For years, this cyst grew slowly, silently, without announcing itself in any dramatic way. Tyler moved through his childhood and into his teen years with this shadow inside his head, unaware of how close danger truly was. Just after his 18th birthday, the cyst made itself known in a way that could no longer be ignored. Tyler underwent his first major brain surgery, a craniotomy, to address the growing pressure inside his skull. He was not yet famous. There were no headlines, no concerned fans sending prayers. It was a quiet, deeply personal battle, fought out of the public eye. And when it was over, it seemed to have been resolved. The surgery was successful in relieving the pressure. The years that followed brought stability, and Tyler moved forward, building the career that would eventually make him a household name. Hollywood Medium debuted, and Tyler Henry stepped into the spotlight as one of the most polarizing and fascinating figures in contemporary entertainment. Skeptics questioned him. Believers held him sacred. And through it all, Tyler carried on, performing readings, connecting people with their grief, and quietly managing the physical and emotional toll that this work extracted from him. He has spoken candidly in interviews about how exhausting mediumship truly is. Behind the calm, centered exterior that viewers saw on screen was a young man who described feeling far older than his years, drained in ways that went beyond ordinary professional fatigue. Whether one believes in his abilities or not, the energy that Tyler brought to his work was undeniable, and the cost of that energy was real and personal. In 2024, Tyler found love. He and Clint Godwin built a relationship that became the quiet foundation beneath all the public-facing work. And in the spring of 2025, they got married, a joyful, celebratory milestone that felt, at least briefly, like a well-deserved chapter of peace and happiness. Friends, family, and fans celebrated alongside them. After everything Tyler had given to the world, it seemed like the universe was finally giving something beautiful back. 1 week later, he was in surgery. The cyst that had been partially addressed years before had returned, aggressive, growing, and pressing against structures in his brain that governed the very cognitive functions Tyler's entire life and career depended on. The symptoms had been building quietly. A mental fog that sleep couldn't lift, an inability to think clearly, a frightening sense that his thoughts were slipping away from him before he could catch them. For someone whose work lives and dies on mental clarity, on the ability to receive subtle impressions and translate them into meaningful communication, these symptoms were not just physically frightening. They struck at the core of his identity. Who was Tyler Henry without a functioning mind? What was left of the medium if the medium's instrument was broken? The surgery on May 14, 2025, just 7 days after his wedding, went forward under the weight of all of that. Clint began posting updates, calm, steady, factual updates that somehow communicated the enormity of what was happening without collapsing under it. The couple's love story, so newly celebrated, was immediately tested in one of the most brutal ways imaginable. What should have been a honeymoon was instead a vigil. Tyler survived. He recovered, at least partially. There were moments in the weeks that followed where it seemed the worst had passed, where his clarity began to return, and his spirit, battered as it was, showed signs of reasserting itself. He shared a photograph from the hospital. He expressed gratitude. He struck the tone of cautious optimism that his fans recognized from years of watching him navigate emotionally complex readings. That particular combination of honesty and hope that had always made him feel trustworthy even to people who doubted his abilities. But the relief did not last. By October 2025, the symptoms had returned. The cognitive fog descended again. The cyst was growing once more. The decision was made to operate again, his third brain surgery in the span of 7 months. Through all of it, Tyler experienced something that fundamentally altered his sense of self in the short term: severe memory loss. He described his short-term memory at its worst as lasting approximately 10 minutes, comparing it to that of a goldfish. He could not retain conversations. He could not hold on to experiences. The man whose entire professional purpose was built on receiving and holding information found himself in a terrifying blank space where information simply would not stick. And it was during this period, this extended, grinding, humbling period of physical breakdown and cognitive fragility, that Tyler broke down crying in a way that his audience had never witnessed before. The tears were not performative. They were not the tears of someone reading a room and responding to its emotional energy. They were the tears of a person who was lost, who was frightened, who did not know if the version of himself that had existed before all of this was ever going to come back. He cried for the clarity he had lost. He cried for the uncertainty of his future. He cried, perhaps, for all the grief he had absorbed from others over the years without ever fully processing his own. And in doing so, he gave his audience something they had not realized they needed: permission to see him as fully human. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Fans who had followed Tyler for years described feeling shattered by his vulnerability. Many shared that they had always drawn comfort from his apparent strength, his ability to remain composed in the face of other people's most devastating losses, and that seeing him undone by his own pain somehow made everything he had ever offered them feel more real, more meaningful. Others shared their own stories of brain surgery, of memory loss, of the particular terror of feeling your own mind become unreliable. Tyler's breakdown opened a conversation that his public persona had never quite allowed for before, and in that opening, something genuine and profound took place between a public figure and the people who had always admired him. In early December 2025, surgeons successfully removed the cyst entirely. The operation that had loomed over the second half of Tyler's year was finally, definitively, completed. The relief was enormous, not just for Tyler and Clint, but for the community that had been watching and waiting and hoping. Recovery would take time. The mind does not simply reset after 3 brain surgeries in 7 months. The body requires patience. The spirit requires gentleness. But the trajectory had shifted. There was now a path forward that did not require constantly bracing for the next crisis. By January 2026, Tyler began sharing updates that reflected genuine progress. His return to the world has been measured and intentional, each step taken with a care that was perhaps not always present in the relentless momentum of his pre-surgery career. He has spoken about feeling changed, more aware of his own limits, more grounded in what truly matters, and perhaps more capable of receiving the kind of compassion he has spent his entire adult life offering to others. He has also, perhaps most remarkably, shared something that sits at the intersection of his medical experience and his professional identity. During one of his surgeries, he experienced what he describes as an out-of-body experience. He documented it through sketches and written reflections, offering his audience a glimpse into how his physical and spiritual worlds collided during the most extreme moments of his crisis. Whatever one believes about the nature of such experiences, the sincerity with which Tyler shared it was unmistakable. This was not content creation. This was a man trying to make sense of something that had happened to him in the most vulnerable hours of his life. There is a particular kind of courage that does not announce itself dramatically. It is the courage of continuing to show up, day after day, when you are not certain you are the same person you were before. It is the courage of letting people see you cry, not because you have decided vulnerability is good branding, but because the tears simply cannot be contained any longer. It is the courage of a man who has spent his career holding space for other people's grief finally, unavoidably, sitting inside his own. Tyler Henry's story is still being written. His recovery continues. His relationship with Clint has been tested and deepened by everything they have endured together. His connection to his work, to the calling that chose him, as he has always described it, remains intact, and by some accounts has been sharpened rather than diminished by what his mind and body have survived. What remains, when you strip away the television shows and the celebrity readings and the cultural debate about whether any of this is real, is simply a person who has faced death more than once before the age of 30, who lost himself temporarily and found his way back, and who, in the middle of all of it, let the world see him fall apart. In a media landscape saturated with curated strength and performed resilience, that kind of honesty is genuinely rare. And for the millions of people who have followed Tyler Henry's journey, it may turn out to be the most meaningful thing he has ever shared.